Welcome to the Get Real Therapy podcast, where we educate and empower you with real therapeutic tools to help you improve your life. If you're listening to this podcast, consider this a sign that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. It's time to get real. So welcome everybody to the Get Real Therapy podcast. I'm Abby.
And I'm V.
And we're super excited that you're here. Today's topic is going to be relationships, and we've talked about doing this episode for a while now, but there's so much to put into it that I feel the excitement behind it all has just almost made it like, it's hard to get everything out there that we want, so we're just going to go for it. Relationships are pretty much everything in our life. There's some relationship attached to it. A relationship, obviously, with a romantic partner, with family, with kids, with friends, but even with your boss, with your coworkers, your relationship with food, your relationship with exercise, your relationship with money, your relationship with everything.
Well, absolutely. I think that all of it could be boiled down to one simple thing, and that all those relationships, the most important relationship that you can have is with yourself.
Just drop these mics, take them off the stand, because We're done.
They don't drop it. That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
See you later.
Yeah. It's true, though.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they look outside of themselves to try to go ahead and feel complete.
Of course.
Whether it be with all those external things. Your family is external to you, your children are external to you, your romantic partner, whatever, they're all external to you. So the only relationship that you should be working on is yourself, because once you go ahead and you master that relationship, and it's being able to show unconditional love to yourself, unconditional compassion to yourself, you're going to go ahead and see that that's something that is applicable to everyone else. But if you're unable to go ahead and show that unconditional love and unconditional compassion to yourself, you have no chance to be able to do that externally.
Absolutely. And I really defining what is actually unconditional love for yourself. So something in the therapy world that we do as therapists, that you do in your therapeutic relationship with your client, is something called unconditional positive regard, which really just means that I'm going to see you despite all of your fears, despite all of your failures, despite all of the stuff going on inside of your life, despite your bad habits, despite your negative cognitions. I'm going to show unconditional positivity towards you in order to see past all that outward stuff and really see you. That, I would say, is really what unconditional love is. Unconditional love does not mean unconditional tolerance, though.
Yeah.
That, I think, is something that I would like to scream from the rooftops, because that's something that people confuse very easily, especially in romantic relationships.
You could say it in family, especially in family too.
Yeah, you know what? You're right.
Yeah.
Putting up with very unhealthy behaviors.
Absolutely.
In the name of family, in the name of blood.
No, I remember so many times I've been put in situations where I knew the individual that I had to go ahead and see was unhealthy, and it's not a situation I would have put myself in. And you would feel guilt-tripped to go ahead and hang out with this person.
Oh, they're family.
Yeah, exactly. They're family. And it's like, yeah, they're family, but they're also very unconscious people. Unconscious in the way they live, unconscious in the way they behave, unconscious in every single aspect. And those people, you need to go ahead and try to help. And when they refuse the help, you need to go ahead and put a barrier up. Your life is so fleeting. Your life is so limited that I'm not going to go ahead and spend my time with those kind of people that don't want to help themselves.
Yeah.
Even if they are family, if they're family and they need help and they want the help, I'm there for you.
That is the difference between having healthy boundaries and then being enmeshed in your familial relationship. So enmeshment is really this dynamic between you and your family, where one person is not seen as their separate autonomous self. Everybody's kind of enmeshed, engulfed in each other. So you come home from work and you're, oh, I had such a bad day. Oh my God, tell me all about it. And then all of your frustrated energy, I start to feel that way. And I am right there with you in it without realizing that I'm my own separate person. I don't have to be feeling the way you're feeling. I can have empathy and compassion for you, but I'm still my own separate self.
Yeah. You see a lot of people and a lot of family units essentially that becomes the only way they bond.
Yes.
It has to be drama. It
Mm-hmm.
has to be, you were not going to believe what this person said.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to believe what happened. And you can see that they feed off of that
Oh, yeah.
negativity
Mm-hmm.
because they stopped learning how to go ahead and do it the healthy way.
Mm-hmm.
And now there has to be a problem. And if there isn't a problem, then it's a boring day,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the opposite. A boring day is having all these problems because you didn't really live.
Mm-hmm.
You're just essentially stuck in someone else's issues the
Mm-hmm.
entire time. Really living is being able to enjoy your own life.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so great. Unconditional love. You need to give that to yourself. You need to go ahead and understand what unconditional love really is. Well, how does that then play out? How are we doing that for ourselves in our own life? Looking at this through the IFS lens, right? When we are in self, when we are in our authentic and spontaneous creativity, our connection with ourself, our connection with one another, our confidence, our courage, our curiosity, our compassion, and our sense of calm, that's when we actually spontaneously know what unconditional love is. Because when you're in yourself, you're not going to go ahead and engage in behaviors that are unhealthy and that are harmful. You're not going to be confused with what unconditional love is and what abuse is.
Yeah, absolutely. One way I use the IFS model of understanding what the true self or your authentic self is, especially when it comes to a relationship, no matter what relationship it is compassion.
Mm-hmm.
If I lost compassion towards that individual, then I know that I'm in a part.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm in a part, whatever decision, emotion, action that I'm going to go ahead and take is going to be the wrong one. I hope everyone knows that that's just because of the fact that when you're in a part, you're not using your prefrontal cortex. And when you're not using your prefrontal cortex, the prefrontal cortex is the only portion of the brain that's responsible for understanding how your thoughts, actions, and behaviors are going to affect you in the long term. So it's really important to go ahead and make sure that that part is connected to your true self. And in order to do that, you have to be aware that it even exists.
Mm-hmm.
So awareness is the first and most crucial step in being able to have a healthy relationship. Unfortunately, that's where a lot of people struggle. And a lot of people struggle with that because they see in society so much falsehood of what a relationship should be. In fact, I remember this one scene in Captain America, and
the first movie.
The first movie. We're going to talk about this movie because most likely everyone's seen it already, right?
It's old.
It's old.
Over 10 years old. So spoiler alert.
Exactly. There's no spoiler alert. Welcome to 2023. Anyway, the point is that there's this one scene that now that we view it through a more conscious state, we realize,
or we understand what really a healthy relationship is, or at least healthier.
Absolutely. We were able to go ahead and see how completely deranged this was.
Yeah.
So just for everyone to understand what happened, Captain Rogers or Captain America, he has a love interest, Peggy. So Captain America is in love with Agent Carter.
Well, he doesn't say he's in love.
Okay.
That's the whole point of this.
Exactly.
You just know that they both have feelings for each other.
Exactly.
But nobody has shared anything with one another.
Absolutely.
It's all unspoken.
Absolutely. Well, one of the first red flags is that he has this picture of her. Which is
a watch?
Pocket, yeah.
No, it's a watch, and there's a picture of her. But it's not a picture that she gave him, and they're not in a relationship.
Absolutely. You can imagine just going to the library and like, oh, I like her, and you just take a picture. That's a red flag right there.
Yeah.
But then the fact that she likes him as well, sees that he's flirting with another girl, and she gets upset with that, that's another red flag too. That's a red flag, not just because of the fact that she got upset, but in the next scene, she gets this gun and shoots at him. And this is literally supposed to go ahead and signify that I am super hurt by this, and I care about you so much that I'm willing to kill you for it.
It was super passive-aggressive behavior. I mean, super passive-aggressive.
That, honestly, if that happened in real life, that person would go to jail.
Yeah, that's homicidal behavior.
Absolutely. And they're presenting it as, oh, Look at
Yeah.
that love. That
Oh my
love,
gosh, she's so
absolutely.
jealous. She loves him
Hmm.
so much. A lot of people equate that if they feel feelings of jealousy, that that just means how much they love someone.
Yeah,
And don't get me wrong, could there be some of an element to that? Yes. But when we feel these extreme feelings, most of the time it's because we already have an extreme wound underneath that these feelings are being filtered through.
yeah,
And that is the concern because then you are not making appropriate decisions and you're not engaging in appropriate behavior.
absolutely. So it's mind-boggling now that you go ahead and you start to see these red flags. The thing is that, especially with the red flags, it's always easy to see external to you,
Mhm.
but it's almost impossible to see it from an internal, like the red flags on yourself,
Mhm.
essentially.
Mhm.
And the reason is it's really simple. You have no awareness, you're not
Mhm.
conscious to them. And that's exactly why internal family systems is such a miracle, because it brings those to light.
Mhm.
That's also why it's important to go ahead and seek therapy, because a lot of times you need that outside perspective for someone to say, listen, I think that this is a red flag.
Yes.
Because internally, you're not going to be able to go ahead and say that it's a red flag, because to you it just makes sense.
Mhm.
I'm sure that to Agent Carter, even though it was a fictional character, that was the appropriate response.
Yeah. I'm going to show you how much it hurt me to see you kiss that other girl
Yeah,
by shooting at you in this moment. And you can sense that emotional tension there in that
yeah,
scene between the two characters.
mhm,
And nobody's a mind reader.
yeah,
So there's a whole other thing is the lack of communication.
absolutely. And the craziest part is how the directors then make the actors say that's what a relationship is. They push the toxicity
Mhm.
as a normal
Mhm.
behavior. They normalize toxicity.
Yes.
And you see that everywhere. You see that from the songs that you hear, you see that from the TV shows that you see.
From
Like,
memes on the internet,
yeah,
okay? I told you this the other day, and I'll tell everybody else. There's this meme that I saw that's like husband, and it says like, I want to go golfing this weekend, and then wife, if I let you go golfing this weekend, what are you going to do for me? And it's if I let you go golfing, that's just such unhealthy behavior. It just is. If I let you go do this, no. Like your husband, your partner, your fiance, they are separate from you as you are separate from them.
yeah,
Now, of course, there needs to be interdependence in relationships. Interdependence is that we're joining together, but you don't control them. And if you're in a situation where somebody's controlling you, you really need to figure out number one, why am I in this situation with somebody who's controlling me? And what can I actually do? Because it's not to say that if you're controlling your partner that you're doing it with ill intent. It could just be that you really care about the relationship and there's a part of you that is concerned of losing that connection or whatever the case may be, and so those controlling types of behaviors come out.
yeah,
So I'm not trying to say that all who do controlling things like that are doing it for ill reasons, but it's still not healthy behavior.
yeah,
It's just not.
absolutely. And a lot of people, they go ahead and they use the word cringe, cringy. And
Yes.
in reality, that's just observing and understanding a level of unconsciousness that should not exist or is not normal.
Hmm.
And that's exactly what cringe is. Cringe is that's not appropriate.
Hmm.
I've witnessed this too. Trying to do something and then the other person is so overprotective they have to go ahead and know who this person. I remember in university one time there was this girl in my class and we had to do a project together, and then literally because we had to do it together in a library, the boyfriend comes over and he straight up
To
wants to,
you?
yeah, like he wants to fight me because I'm
And you're
doing a
in
project with her.
college.
Yeah, and I'm in college. And then she tries to go ahead and tell him away. And I didn't know what to go ahead and do because this is so unhealthy. I felt genuine fear for this girl.
Yeah.
And the crazy part is she still went with him.
Wow.
That's the crazy part. And to this day, I don't know what the hell happened.
That is a real concern that if you have an extremely controlling partner, where does that end? And now, obviously, a lot of those extreme behaviors are indicative of major psychiatric illness and personality disorders. Their cognitions are just so distorted at that point.
Yeah.
So it's not the average
No,
situation.
but you said personality disorders. It's interesting to understand that once you understand internal family systems, it does almost blur the lines of what is congenital and then what are just extreme parts.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Right.
that it's a combination of both.
No, absolutely. It absolutely is. But that, to me, that also does make it so that a lot of these other issues are completely solvable if the person is willing to go ahead and admit that,
or at
I
least,
have an issue.
yeah, or at least a lot more manageable.
Manageable, yeah, manageable,
Yeah.
yeah. The reason I say that is because I'm familiar with having interactions with people that had personality disorders, and at that point, I had an inkling into why their behaviors were in such a way, especially as you get to go ahead and know them more and more. And you realize it's just unhealthy upbringing. And you see the trauma of their unhealthy upbringing in front of your face, and you realize, now I understand why this person's behaving this way. But the core element of their inability to become healthier is they're always going to go ahead and say that those problems are external to them.
Yeah, that's like, yeah, the core feature of a personality disorder is lack of self-awareness, and that they're the victim. And that's the thing, is that, again, when it comes down to the neuroscience behind all mental health issues, but just personality in general, your personality is shaped from your experiences, somewhat from your genetics, your temperament. A lot of it really is the whole nurture versus nature debate. But they really have proven that it's a lot more nurture than it is nature, specifically just in the context of twin studies that they've done this on. The core feature of personality in general is that whatever you strengthen the most is how you're going to go ahead and show up in your life. So your experiences are going to impact how you show up in the world. These are all neural networks in the brain. What you use over and over again is going to get stronger and stronger and stronger. Whatever you practice is going to get stronger and stronger and stronger. It's going to become automatic inside of your brain, because your brain remembers what is important. If I'm doing this over and over and over again, it has a purpose. So it must be useful in my life. And eventually you just start doing things automatically. And that's obviously also in terms of habit. You know, if you think about this for somebody who's had trauma, and then they have these trauma responses that they've practiced over and over and over again, that becomes who they are. And that, to me, is the definition of a personality disorder, is that their trauma response has become their personality, and it's so ingrained in them now that they don't see that as something separate from themselves. They don't have that ability to self-reflect on these behaviors anymore. Where maybe for somebody who has anxiety, it's, oh, I have anxiety, and I know that this anxiety causes me to feel uncomfortable in social circles. It causes me to not want to go out and do certain activities. But you have this self-awareness that you realize that this anxiety is creating those behaviors in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the most important takeaways from everything that we've talked about is understanding that if it's nature versus nurture, which one are you fully in control with? You know, if you keep saying, oh, you have this genetic predisposition, you're not in control of that. So it's a fantastic thing to go ahead and realize that these problems are coming internally. And if they are coming internally, then I absolutely have the power to fix them. And it takes courage to go ahead and do that, because the courage is, I made a mistake. You know, courage is there to go ahead and push you to say, I need this change. And if you continuously blame it on external factors, there's never any solution. You're never going to be able to fix this world to go ahead and essentially, you know, adapt to your feelings, or adapt to your needs, or adapt to whatever it is that you think is an issue. You know, it has to be internally.
If we understand that we need to have a healthy relationship with ourselves in order to be able to have healthy relationships with others, then how can we go ahead and do that? What would you say is something somebody can immediately start doing?
The first thing is seeking help, finding a therapist that understands internal family systems, or even AEDP.
So for what he said, because it can kind of sound confusing, it's AEDP, Accelerated Experiential Dynamic Psychotherapy.
So seeking therapy is obviously one of the most important things you can do. In fact, if you're not doing that, it's only going to go ahead and put you in a cycle of continuously finding out these problems over and over and over again. So you constantly hear this. Why do I keep meeting the wrong people? Why does this continue to happen to me? I've said it. You know, it's until I realize these problems is because I'm not detecting the red flags that this person's unhealthy, because I am equally unhealthy to detect that.
Yes. That is such a powerful thing for people to understand, is that you will be attracted to people who mirror the same health that you're at, even if it's presented in different
Absolutely,
formats.
absolutely. For example, I could go ahead and confidently say that some previous relationships, they were a lot more unstable. And it's not to go ahead and say that I'm perfect. That's not what I'm saying at all. It's more of I had an instability to detect that.
Hmm.
The part of me to be able to realize that that person's unstable was not functioning.
Let's go talk about this because I feel this is a full circle moment, especially if people listen to the last episode on attachment.
Hmm.
So, we already talked about that for you, what you would identify was your attachment style before you did the work with IFS that gave you a secure attachment style with yourself is an avoidant dismissive attachment style.
Yeah.
Now, what is that characteristic of? Again, it's a history of instability in relationships with your primary caregivers. And so that can look like a lot of different people coming in and out of your life in your childhood, or just having parents that were just not available emotionally or physically or whatever, to where you can really depend on them to meet your emotional, physical needs. And so that instability sets you up as an adult to, number one, not trust in outside relationships. But number two, you're so used to that instability already that of course you can't pick it up in somebody that you're then attracted to, because then you have all these neurochemicals like dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin shooting off in your brain, the love chemicals that already make you an idiot in the first place, as all of us as teenagers like can look back on. So you already have that, but now you're mixing that with an insecure attachment style. Of course, you're not going to pick up on those things.
Yeah, absolutely. We're trying to go ahead and say is how to eventually get a healthy relationship. It's not to go ahead and say you shouldn't try, but you shouldn't necessarily expect too much of a success because, like we were saying, if all you could do is attract the level of consciousness that you're exhibiting,
Hmm.
unless you were super lucky and you were born with conscious parents, which very few people are,
Hmm.
you're going to attract somebody just as toxic.
Hmm.
And that's going to be the repetition that you see over and over. The first thing that needs to happen is you need to go ahead and work on yourself first. Once you do have that ability to find some level of consciousness, surrounding yourself with friends that
Yes.
understand these concepts so you could actually have real opinions, because what ends up
Yes.
happening is you ask your friends, and if your friends are unfortunately not in a level of consciousness, they're only going to propagate that problem. They're probably going to say, oh, this person is a blah blah blah, dump them. Oh, he's definitely cheating, or blah blah.
You're going to manifest your worst fear because their protective parts of
Yeah.
themselves, based on their experiences, are going to be seeing the situation through their own fears. And then because they care about you, they're unfortunately just going to give you advice that
Yeah.
suits their perspective.
Yes. In order to go ahead and become conscious, like I said, you have to understand what kind of attachment style you had. It was incredibly important to understand that I had that dismissive attachment style. And even though I used that information to just recognize the pattern, understanding that didn't necessarily help me fix
Exactly.
it. It just pushed me to recognize there's stuff I need to go ahead and do, and internal family systems is what did it.
Hmm. And again, attachment styles form with your primary caregivers and then they follow you throughout your life, but it doesn't mean you're stuck in them. You
Yeah.
can do different experiential types of therapy like IFS, like AEDP, that really go ahead and help you reparent those different younger parts of yourself, as well as teach you how to access your most authentic self that you have lost access to from these different experiences and conditioning that you have experienced throughout your life. And so there is hope, there is healing, there is the ability to live beyond your wildest dreams. I can say that in this moment, and it makes me emotional, that where I'm at in my life now, I never, ever, ever thought I would get here. I remember I used to look out my bedroom window as a child and I used to think, I want to live an extraordinary life. And I can say through the help of my therapist, who, oh, God bless that man, literally helped me change my life because he practiced these different types of therapies. I can say now I am currently living a life beyond my wildest dreams, especially from where I once was with my mental health. But I can also say that I know that the potential is limitless. So we mentioned finding yourself, an IFS, ADP, informed therapist that can really help you heal any type of insecure attachment style, as well as give you these tools and the ability to really create this self-awareness around all the different parts of yourself that get activated specifically in relationships. And so that's really important, because not only do you have parts, but your partner has parts, and your mom has parts, and your dad and your sister, your brother, your friends, your coworkers, everyone has parts. And so
you get a part.
Yeah,
You get a
yes.
part. You get a part.
Exactly.
You get parts, actually.
Yes. And the thing that's super interesting is that we typically will also attract partners that have the opposite attachment style as us. Not always, but a very common relationship dynamic is an insecure avoidance attachment style and an insecure anxious attachment style. The two main differences between them is that for an insecure anxious person, they feel safe getting really close to their partner, and for an avoidance insecure attachment style, they don't feel safe getting that close. So when the anxious person gets triggered and they're like getting closer, kind of exhibiting those clingy types of behavior, to the avoidant insecure attachment styled person, they're like this is too much. I need some space. And so then they retreat. And now the anxious person is freaking out because they're moving farther away and they're feeling that disconnect and they're feeling that resistance. And that makes them start to become more anxious. And it's this just cycle, right? So now you've created disconnect, right? There's disconnect in the relationship. Now, the anxious person, that period of being so anxious because they feel that disconnect does wear out. Now, when they're more kind of like chill again, they're not as triggered. Now that makes it feel safe for the avoidant partner to come back. So it's constantly this like push-pull like dance that they're in. If you don't heal that attachment style for either person, then you're constantly going to be in that cycle in your relationship, and you're not going to experience the emotional intimacy that you actually could. Because It's not to say that the avoidant person can't be close. It's just that if they don't heal that part of themselves that feels unsafe being close, then they're never going to be able to actually do that consistently.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the same thing with the anxious partner. If they can't learn to just trust that at times you can have space from your partner, then it's not going to play out the way that you want it to.
So then what's your opinion? If you're listening to this, if you're hearing this, you want help. Mm-hmm. What happens, and I've seen this time and time again, if somebody wants the help, but they're with a partner that doesn't want the help?
Number one, focus on yourself first. Because when you're in any type of relationship, you're in it for a reason. There is some shared history, even if the history is 6 months, 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, whether there's children, no children, whatever. There's a history, there's a community. Your friends are probably some of their friends. Your family has met each other, most likely in any type of longer relationship. So in that length of time, it's usually, for most people, not going to have all been bad. So there's going to be some memories that are extremely positive for you. There's going to be certain aspects of the relationship that make you happy. But at the same time, if we're talking about what you're talking about right now, where there's somebody who is unhappy in the relationship they're in, they would like to change it, they would like to get help, but they have a partner that doesn't want to, that's a little bit different. But again, there's still this shared history. So if you don't go ahead and work on yourself first, then even if you can get to a place that you're able to acknowledge, you know what, this person has repeatedly chosen to not get help, to not change, to not go ahead and get to a place where we can appropriately meet each other's needs, I'm going to remove myself from this relationship. If you're really not super clear on that, all that emotional history that you share with that person will pull you back. All the fear, all the shame, all of the whatever it is will pull you back. Yeah. So if you don't really work on yourself first and get super clear with what you want for yourself in your life, you will not get out of that cycle. Yeah. And so it's okay if you're in that type of relationship and you're unhappy and you know that it's not healthy. Focus on yourself first, get healthy first, and then either that's going to inspire your partner to change, or it will put you in a place where you can confidently walk away from that situation. Absolutely. And walk away from the relationship.
I know, that's fantastic. I think another issue, though, is a lot of people don't even realize they're in that situation. And I think I realized in my own life that I was in that situation when I wasn't with that person. And I realized what a tremendous difference it is. I remember going on a vacation one time and I realized I'm happy. you know,
Mm.
and I'm
Like
happy,
your
like I'm having.
internal energy was just at
Absolutely,
peace.
absolutely. And when you are able to go ahead and sense such a dramatic shift in terms of your happiness, in terms of the energy that's surrounding you when this person isn't there, then that's the biggest red flag ever. And that's one red flag I couldn't ignore.
Mm-hmm.
So it then became, does this person want to help themselves?
Mm-hmm.
And if they do want to help themselves, then that's a different scenario. But in that situation, they didn't want to go ahead
Mm-hmm.
and help themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And by help themselves, they have to just try anything, whether it's exercise, eating healthy, seeing somebody, taking some medication, even though at that point I believed in medication. I no longer believe in medication anymore in terms of that being the ultimate cure.
Mm-hmm.
Is it something that is a stepping stone? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so if the person's able to go ahead and even give you a little bit of, I'm willing to go ahead and try, then that just shows that that relationship is still worth investing your time in. But I said in the beginning, our lives are fleeting. We have a limited amount of time to enjoy this moment. If it's not done with somebody that wants to go ahead and live their best life, get out of that relationship. It doesn't matter how much history you have.
And it also
Like,
doesn't matter if it's even with a friendship, you know?
yeah,
If
absolutely.
somebody is not helping you evolve and
Yeah.
grow, it doesn't mean that you have to continue in that relationship. Or it could be a different way that you approach the relationship. Maybe you no longer do certain activities with that person or spend the same amount of time that you would with that person. So it's really coming down to paying attention to who do I feel my best with? When do I feel my best? If it's not with certain people, that's okay. When you really think about how relationships started in the first place, number one, it is the most natural thing in our life. Like, we are born into relationship already as human beings. But there's things that have happened through people's parts leading the way in their life that has created stipulations around relationships. So we already have the context of marriage, right? So if you look at the evolution of marriage, where we're at now is completely different than where it started. When people first married, it was not for love, it was for resources, right? Now you fast forward into our century and getting married is for love, right? Now, of course, there's some beneficial resources that can come from that, but the main reason people choose to get married in 99% of the cases is because I love this person so much and this is just what you do. This is the next step, okay? And now, while that might be right for some people, that's great. It might not be right for everyone. But the thing is that so many of us have never really been shown how to become self-aware enough to know what really is authentic to you at your core. And so we think that we want these certain things. And so we go along for that ride.
Yeah, society teaches you that's the next step.
Mm-hmm.
Society, like,
Movies,
yeah, absolutely.
your
Every single
family,
thing.
you know, like culture, it's really big in certain cultures. Like, certain cultures are like, you know, you don't leave my house until you get married. You know, that's how it is for some cultures. When you again see the evolution of marriage and see how it's turned into now, it can be really uncomfortable to go against that standard. And you can really feel like something's wrong with you if you don't buy into that standard or if you change your mind on that. You think
Absolutely.
about the people who threw $40,000 weddings and now 6 years later in their marriage, they're unhappy. And maybe they've tried therapy, maybe they haven't, whatever the case may be. Now there's all this, oh my gosh, like threw away all this money. All of our friends are friends with each other. Our families are intertwined with one another. Maybe you have kids, maybe you don't. And of course, that is a big factor. You don't just take that lightly when it comes to children. But at the end of the day, what is the example you're setting for your kids? That's a separate thing because your children are literally sponges. So whatever they see is what they're going to think that their reality is
And
supposed to be.
that's the next cycle. If you're in cycles in terms of your relationship, that's the next cycle in a bigger, I guess, point of view in terms of you're creating. They're going to go ahead and
The
copy.
next generation is
Exactly.
going to follow in your
Absolutely,
footsteps.
absolutely.
Or seeing their parents in an unhealthy, unhappy relationship and want the complete opposite,
Yeah.
which then can push them in a completely different direction.
Absolutely. Talking about that, you know, we also see how time influences our decision-making process in terms of seeing if this relationship or these aspects of relationships can be viewed as, I'm going to tolerate it. I see this so much, especially with fighting, right? You see couples fighting, a lot of women and men too. You see people tolerating abuse. And why do they tolerate that abuse? Because they saw it within their own family and they experienced their hardships. But guess what? throughout time, maybe it got better.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes it even worse if it got better, because what happens is, oh yeah, my mom and dad, they're together still. They love each other. I'm talking about just an amalgamation of these
Yeah, you
people.
hear it
Exactly.
throughout different
And
people.
exactly. And because they love each other now, their struggles to get there is an appropriate
It's fine. Yeah.
situation. So
Tolerating all that chaos, all that instability,
absolutely.
all that abuse was
Yeah,
okay.
and you see that time and time
Mm-hmm.
again, where people get into relationships and they scream, they fight a lot more, and they just think that's just the way it is. That's
Mm-hmm.
just natural.
Mm-hmm.
It's the inability to recognize being unconscious to that situation is what's going to go ahead and continuously keep you in a cycle.
Mm-hmm. I think going back to what we were talking about in terms of, okay, like what are the steps people need to take in order to really cultivate that healthy relationship with themselves and then be able to have that reflected back to them in the relationships in their own life. We already discussed seeking out a therapist, especially if you are aware that you're in cycles. And having somebody who is unbiased and not a part of your everyday life is so crucial. People think, oh, I could just talk to my friend about it. I could talk to my mom.
Yeah,
No, you can't.
your friend has parts, your
Yeah.
mom has parts, unless
And
she
they have,
understands.
yeah, and they have a buy-in
Yeah.
too. They want to see you happy. And if they see things that are causing you pain, it's going to really make it difficult for them to remain unbiased, because a lot of people have a hard time seeing people they care about in pain.
Absolutely.
And so as a therapist, though, you have a very specific type of relationship. It's a therapeutic relationship. And so therefore, you're not seeing this person in your everyday life. And so they don't have the same, of course, they want you to get better, but they don't have the same buy-in as your friends and your family do. So a therapist is extremely helpful, as well as educating yourself. So obviously, listening to this type of podcast, you are educating yourself. And that really is a huge component of living a more self-aware, healthy life, is education. Because again, we're only sitting here because we found IFS and it changed our lives so radically that we want to share this with every single person on the face of this earth. Some of the books, though, that we read initially as we started on our own mental health journeys really also helped us get to this point, because for me anyway, I find the brain and body fascinating. And as somebody who has experienced a lot of anxiety and panic attacks for many, many years of my life, understanding how my brain and body works, especially my stress response that would lead to anxiety attacks, that would lead to panic attacks. For people who've never had a panic attack can literally make you think that you're dying, or it can make you think that you're having a heart attack or a stroke, because that's what happened to me. Was I experienced out of nowhere, watching TV, complete numbness on my arm all the way up into my face, out of nowhere, just watching TV, and literally called 911. I was convinced I was having a stroke. I go to the emergency room, they run all these tests. Guess what? That was a panic attack. And so learning that what's happening is that my blood vessels are dilating when I'm reaching such a high degree of stress, even subconsciously, that's creating some of the tingly feelings, that's creating some of the numbness. Now, my body is speaking to my brain with this sensation. My brain is like, this is a foreign feeling. This is an unknown feeling. There might be something wrong. Hence, everyone's taught this. Oh, if you start having pain in your left arm, it could be a heart attack. So again, if you don't normally feel those things, and then you already have anxiety brewing underneath the surface, now your brain is registering a feeling that's not normally there. Then you start to have these thoughts of something is wrong. So learning how the brain and body works, especially in regards to anxiety, panic, was so incredibly healing for me. Now, my panic attacks are so far and few between, but when I get them, my approach to them is completely different. So now, if I start getting that pins and needles, tingly
you still
feeling.
Get that feeling?
Sometimes, yeah. And so I normally will get this feeling mostly at nighttime when I'm going to sleep. And I think that's because I'm not in a position to be busy anymore. So the main management part of my personality that's been go, go, go all day is now slowing down and shutting down. So some of these other parts have an ability to speak. And again, these other parts of yourself, some of them just need connection from you. Some of them need awareness. And some of them are still living in the past inside of my subconscious, experiencing frozen in time the trauma of whatever is getting triggered in that moment, whatever my brain is associating in the environment, right? Now, when I get those, moments of panic and I start feeling that pins and needles sensation and I feel my heart rate is starting to go faster and I'm starting to feel like my breathing is more shallow, like there's a part of me that is activated, that's okay. I still love and accept this part of myself. If I feel that I cannot control the panic through that type of positive self-talk and also just saying to myself, okay, I understand that my body is doing this. This is time limited. All panic attacks are time limited. They will not last forever. And that was something that I did not know initially in my own mental health journey. And so when you start to get that intense panic, you start to freak out more because you think this might last forever, or you think it's going to lead to something worse, right? And so now if I'm in the moment and I start to feel panic, I'll tell myself, okay, this is time limited, maybe I'll start doing some grounding techniques. I really love something I started just recently doing, which is called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Noticing 5 things that you can see, noticing 4 things that you can feel, noticing 3 things that you can hear. So maybe you hear the air conditioning or the fan on in your room and you notice that. 2 things that you can smell. You probably can't smell too much, but you can pretend that you're smelling something that you like chocolate chip cookies or the ocean, whatever. And then 1 thing you can taste. And then again, most likely you're not probably tasting anything at that point in time. So you could picture, what is it that I like to taste? That exercise really brings you into the present moment. It's starting to shift those neural networks into one that's focused on the here and now. And when you start to do that, you start to trick your brain into realizing nothing is actually wrong. But if my panic does continue to rise, then I might get up. And a trick that I learned is that you could put cold water on your wrist. So you can go into your bathroom or your kitchen and you could put the water on cold and you could put both your wrists underneath the water. And that is just something that helps your body start to calm down more. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So if you ever hear water running in the middle of the night, it might be me in the bathroom with panic. But most likely not, thankfully. But yes, I've definitely done that. You can also put ice cubes there. I don't know the full science behind it, but some of it is just that the cold is shocking to your body. So it's bringing you more into the present moment because you're noticing that icy cold feeling. So yeah, so those are some things that I would say that people can do. And I feel that was a whole tangent on panic attacks. But
yeah, seriously. Can we get back to the relationships?
People in relationships have panic attacks. Some people do. And so that really affects your relationship. If you're a highly anxious person, well, let me rephrase that. If you are a person that has some very highly anxious parts of themselves, that impacts your relationship. I know it because I lived that way for a very long time. And it absolutely impacted the relationship that I was in. Not only the relationship with a partner, but a relationship with every single person in my life. So learning in terms of your brain, your body, your stress response really can be a huge help in terms of working with these different parts of yourself.
So one book that's great is specifically for how the mind and the body are intertwined is that book you recommended.
It's called The Body Keeps the Score. It shows you that your experiences in your life have a direct effect on your nervous system, and your nervous system is what is responsible.
Right?
Yeah, somatic responses. Your nervous system is what's responsible for your stress response. It's what's responsible for when you get those feelings of anxiety, like the rapid heartbeat and the shallow breathing. So really learning about that is fantastic. In terms of, parts in general, a very public-friendly book that doesn't have to be for a clinician is called No Bad Parts by Dr. Richard Schwartz. It's one of his newest releases that could be used for anybody,
That's an excellent book.
And that really gives you a very good, thorough foundation of IFS and how to start doing it in your own life. They have IFS meditations in that book, so it'll kind of guide you through you becoming aware of a part of yourself that's activated, what is its thoughts, what is its feelings, creating that separation from you in that part to really be able to address that need that that part has and why it's showing up inside of your life. So besides then education, what else is something that somebody can do to start helping their relationships?
I think just obviously making the other person aware that something even needs to happen, having that uncomfortable conversation.
Like for somebody who's in a relationship, you mean that's one person's noticing it's unhealthy and they want to.
Exactly. But in terms of yourself, right, I think that once you are able to find the importance of finding a therapist, the importance of doing this research, having the belief, if you don't necessarily believe it at this moment, I promise you it's going to happen. It's going to happen that eventually you're going to feel that whatever we're telling you, that this is what's going to fix your life, it 100% exists, and it is closer than you might think. And the reason a lot of people don't believe it, or they're like, you know what, therapy isn't for me, or do reading these books, I don't feel that it's important, is because at this moment, they only have the tools they were born with that their own life gave them. Of course, that's not the tools that was sufficient to go ahead and show them how to actually live a fruitful life. And until you actually get those tools, and you can get these tools, understanding it is not what I'm talking about. It's understanding it innately, or learning how to express it from a core level. That's when the magic happens. And I always say that's a 3-step process. Number 1, knowing it exists. Number 2, understanding the players, or understanding how the mind works. And number 3 is putting it to practice and being able to change something that you couldn't change. You thought, oh, it's impossible, I'm born this way, I can't do this or I can't do that, and all of a sudden it's gone. And you never have to worry about that problem again. That's when you realize how important it is. And when you realize how important it is, the possibilities become limitless. Once that limitless mindset is there, that's when you truly understand it. So anybody that's listening to this, if you don't understand that it's limitless, if you don't have this passion, if you don't have this desire to go ahead and have the world understand it, then I'm sorry to tell you, you don't get it. And that's not a bad thing, because it's close. It's much closer than you think.
And it's not to say that you can't get there.
Yeah,
no.
And
I think that especially the more life that you've lived in a certain way, or
I've had people tell me, and these are people I care about, that I'm too old to change. And this is with their own relationships, especially with their own relationships themselves, or even their relationships with their significant other.
Well, yeah, I mean, you hear this all the time. I can't leave this relationship. Like, oh, I'm so old, I won't find anyone. Yeah. That's some people's fears.
Absolutely. I meant it more of like,
they can't change themselves. Yeah,
for
sure. Oh, this is just the way I am.
Yeah. And again, it has to be yourself first before you could even try to help somebody else.
Yeah.
And it's really important to understand that you'll most likely never be able to truly help somebody else. You can only really help yourself.
It's so true.
All you could do is be that example. And that's the most you could do to somebody to try to help them.
Yeah, and it goes back to then, like, there's this quote that I love so much that says, go and love somebody exactly as they are and watch them transform into the best version of themselves. And I remember really living by that quote for a period of time in my life and seeing that come to fruition in my life with the people that I cared about. Because ultimately, if I'm loving you exactly as you are in this moment and I'm accepting you as you are, then I'm not attached. I don't have anything to lose or gain, because I'm just accepting who you are in this moment. Now, that means that you're living in reality. So I'm not living in this fictional world of maybe one day they'll change, or maybe one day they'll go back to how they used to be when we first started dating. No, I'm accepting and loving you for who you are. But that also means that I'm accepting and loving you in reality, which is then making me responsible for how do I want to live my life and how do I want to show up in my life, and is this relationship actually no longer serving me? Because that other phrase of, like, if you love something, set it free. Okay, maybe it's super cliche, but at the end of the day, if you love yourself, set yourself free. If you love your friends and your family, free to be where they are, to experience their own journey. You don't need to coddle them. You don't need to try to go ahead and keep them safe from their own fears, their own shame. We're all on our own journey. And like you said, we have to be that example, and it starts with ourselves.
Absolutely.
Well, I feel like that probably should wrap up now.
In reality, there's tons more.
Oh, yeah, because relationships are so crucial and it's so part of our life. Definitely having more episodes that are geared towards this, going through how to have healthy relationships, even with your parents, your siblings, your friends, at work, again, with food, with exercise, with money. These are all other relationships we couldn't even touch on. So we definitely will do additional episodes on those topics.
But till then.
So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.